Question 2 on page 111 of Modern Accounting. So this question here, JOD. So what we have to do, we have to journalize the corrections. So when this person would have done a trial balance and they add up all the debits and credits, they didn't end up being the same. So because of that, they had to create this suspense account, which basically shows the total of the error, the difference between the two sides. You don't know necessarily what the difference is, but you will deduce this by doing the correction. So when you correct all the mistakes, you'll be able to enter that into the suspense account, and that will cancel the error that was originally made. So we'll start by doing the journal for the corrections. So usually the way these sentences are worded, the first part of the sentence is what actually happened. Sorry, what should have happened. And then this person actually did something wrong. So then the third thing then is the correction. So we need to correct. Once we know what they should have done, we'll be able to spot the thing that they did wrong. So goods valued at 230 returned to OD had not been entered in the book, so not been put anywhere. So that should be a straightforward one in that there's no correction. We just need to put in what should we have done when goods are returned to OD. And top of the question, JOD, I am JOD. So goods returned to me. So they're goods I would have sold. So that's sales returns. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then the person who I sold the goods to, they owe me less money. So those people are called debtors. So now we need to think about the debit and credit. So I'll do the debtors first. So debtors, according to my bookkeeping key, debtors are an asset, and they're in the DR column. So if I have more asset, if the debtors owe me more money, then I'll have a debit entry in it. But in this case, they owe me less because I've returned goods, so I'll have credit. So I'll credit debtors, and the amount of money is 220, which means that the sales returns must be the opposite. Okay, now sales, just so we know, is an income, which is a credit entry. So sales returns is cancelling an income. So sales returns is actually an expense. So, and that is in the debit column, and we have more expense, more goods were returned, so that's why it's debit. So that's done correctly. And when we look, we see that there's a debit and a credit. So that means that there's, like, the two sides add up to be the same. So there's no suspense needed. So I'm just going to put in goods, and you have to put a narration on this, okay? So you have to actually put a sentence explaining why you're doing this correction. So goods returned, not entered. Just a single sentence like that should do. Question 2. Purchases returns book have been undercast by €100. So I need to change my purchase returns account. Because, so purchase returns book is a place where I record all of the goods that I bought that I had to send back. And when I added up all of the goods that I sent back, I added up and I under-totaled it. So when I say undercast, it was under-totaled. So I put 100 too little in it. So I need to change my purchase returns. Now, purchases is an expense. So purchase returns is the opposite of it. It's an income. So if I have more income, okay, more purchase returns, I'll have a credit entry. If I have less, I'll have a debit entry. Now in this case, it says purchase returns was undercast, so I have too little. So I have to put 100 more in purchase returns. So 100 goes in there. Now, and I'll just put here, this is going to be a credit entry. Now, there's the purchase return, the total of purchase returns book was under-totaled. That doesn't mean that what was put into the people's accounts, so the creditors, was done wrong. So we presume creditors was done right. So that means that the only correction I have for this is purchase returns, which means there must be a suspense. Because I only have 100 in the credit here, which means the two sides won't add up to be the same. So there will be a suspense, which will have 100 on the debit side. So, and it's a debit. Next one, JOD invested $5,000 in the business, omitted from the books, like the first one, not entered in the books. So that means it won't be a suspense for this one, okay? Oh, I just realized I have to put in my narration here. Purchases Just copying straight from the question. So when somebody invests 5 grand into a business, there'll be more money in the bank, and the money that you put into a business is called capital. Now, bank has more money. Bank is an asset, so I have more money, so that means I'll have a debit in bank. And capital is a liability. Why is it a liability? It's because it's money owed by the business back to the owners. When they put more money in, the business owes that money back to the owners. So we'll have 5 grand in there on the credit side and 5 grand on the debit side in bank. So investment not recorded. That's just short and sweet. TO2, a debtor, was declared bankrupt owing 540. He paid 80 cents in the euro. That means he paid 80% of the 540 that he owed. No entry made in the book regarding the bad debt. Okay, so that means I have to record now here that there's going to be money in bank. So we received some money. We have to cancel the TO2 account. And the money that we're missing, so the 20%, is going to be a bad debt. So what type of accounts are these? So bad debt is an expense because we're losing out money. So because it's an expense, so by using my bookkeeping key, I'll have a debit entry in it. Okay, the amount of money will come to now in a second. TO2 is a debtor. A debtor is an asset, but we're cancelling this debtor, so we're going to have a credit entry in the TO2 account. And bank, we received some money, so bank is an asset, so we have more money in the bank, so DR. Okay, so he's declared bankrupt owing 540. So the debt he had was 540. So we're cancelling the 540 debt. He paid 80 cents in the euro, so that means he paid 80% of the 540. So 432, and the bad debt, the money we're losing out on, is the remaining 20% of the debt. Okay, so no record of bankrupt. Okay, next one. A payment of 400 received from a debtor have been debited to his account. Okay, so that means we put it in the wrong side. So my debtor is the thing that's done wrong. So I need to go and look at that. So I'll have to, the account I'll be dealing with is a debtor. Debtor is an asset. My asset, they paid me money. Okay, so that means that there should be a credit entry in the debtor's account. Okay, because the debtor owes less when they pay up, they owe us less money. The payment 400 had been debited to his account. So I put a debit of 400 in his account, whereas I should have put a credit, meaning the person owes me more money. So to fix this, because I put it on the wrong side, I have to double it. So I'm going to put one 400 to cancel the thing I did wrong by putting a debit in, and another 400 to do the thing I should have done in the first place. So you got a total of 800 will go in there. And because this was put on the wrong side of his account, it means that it would have affected my trial balance. My trial balance wouldn't have balanced, so that means I will need a suspense for that. And the suspense must be the opposite of what we did do, so it's going to be a debit. Okay, so I had 800 on the credit, so I must have had 800 on the opposite side in suspense. And finally, rent received 150 have been treated in the general ledger as rent paid. Okay, so always have to put in this here. So payment on wrong side of debtor's account. Now, so next one. So rent received 150. So we received money. Now the general ledger. Talk to general ledger here. So a ledger is what you would have done in Junior Cert Record Book 3. So it's a place where you have loads of T accounts. We have 3 ledgers. We've got the general ledger, or nominal ledger, a debtor's ledger, and the creditor's ledger. Now the debtor's ledger is a list of all the accounts of my customers who owe me money. So it'll be a Paddy Smith account, an A. Jones account. Creditors, likewise, people I owe money to. And all of the other accounts are put in the general ledger. So the general ledger has an insurance account, a wages account, a purchases account. All of those other accounts are all in the general ledger. So that means that the two accounts for rent would be rent and bank. Okay, and rent received means I should be receiving money, but I put it on the wrong side in the rent account. In the general ledger, I put it as rent paid. So it's the rent account is wrong, and because I treated it, in the rent account as paid rather than received, it means it would affect my trial balance. So I will need a suspense. I'm just going to write down suspense first. I don't know what I'm going to do with suspense just yet, but I will need a suspense for this. So the other then is going to be rent. I'm just going to put the rent received account. Now rent received is an income, and just going back to the bookkeeping key, and again in the exam I'd advise you write the bookkeeping key down at the very beginning, and I always keep on referring back to it. So rent received is an income. Okay, so I should have received an income and had €150 on the credit side here of the rent account, but it was treated as rent paid, which would be an expense on the opposite side. So a bit like the previous one, I need to double it. So I put 300 on the correct side. So that means that's a credit. So that means my suspense must be a debit of 300. So rent received, treated as paid. Okay, so there's my adjustment. So I've now dealt with the journalizing of the necessary corrections. Now I need to go and do my suspense account. So I take this information, and anytime I see the word suspense mentioned, I need to put that into my suspense account. So if I just go back up to the suspense account I created here. So it's a blank document ready for me to put numbers into it. It was created when the trial balance was done, and we found that the trial balance, the two sides didn't add up to be the same. So there was a balance put into the suspense account. We just don't know what the balance was and what side it was on. So I'm going to leave the first line of the suspense account blank, so that at the end, the difference between the two sides will tell me what the original balance was. We'll see this as we go through this now. Okay, so if I just expand out. Okay, let's go and have a look at all of the other accounts. So I'm starting at the beginning here, and I'm reading down through this, and I'm looking for anywhere that they mention suspense in the general journal. So first one, there's no suspense. There's a debit suspense, €100 for the second one, so I'm just going to put in €100, and the words, the details for this were purchases returns, so I'll put purchases returns. Next one. No suspense, no suspense. Oh, suspense here. So debit suspense 800, and the other account is called debtors. Okay, next, and then the last one there was suspense of 300, and the other account is called rent received. Okay, so these are the three corrections, so that means my error must have been all of those added together. So there must have been an original balance that came from my trial balance of whatever these add up to be. So if I add up 100 and 800 and 300, that gives me 1200, which means my total there must be 1200, so my original balance that I had from my trial balance must have been 1200. So that's how to do suspense for an ordinary level question, for question 2.